Who the hell is this? Poet, playwright, spy, scandalous icon. This is Aphra Behn, one of the first women to earn a living off of writing. Her early life is super obscure. We don't even know for sure who her parents were. Some people say she was born to a couple whose last name was Amos. Some people think she could be the child of authority figures in colonial Suriname. But Encyclopedia Britannica and a dump truck full of other scholars say that she was actually born to a barber named Bartholomew Johnson outside of Canterbury. She got the last name Ben when she married a merchant who was maybe Dutch or German. It's kind of hard to figure out because there's like barely any record of this guy. But chances are he probably died shortly after the marriage. There's a debate on whether or not she made him up, like just to change her surname and appear as a widow, so she would look better than just like a single woman. Anyway, before she was a writer, she was a spy, and she mostly chilled out in Antwerp, which is in modern-day Belgium, and kept an eye on things for the king. Charles II, not Charles I, whose bean was forcibly removed by Oliver Cromwell and the Roundheads. This execution made Cromwell the Roundhead of State of England. This period from 1649 to 1660 is called the Interregnum. Basically, Parliament ran the country, and the Roundhead government was in charge. She was a royalist, and she strongly supported the English monarch and absolutism, because, democracy. Eventually, the English monarchy was restored, and Charles II was the first king after the Interregnum. That's why this period, post-1660 in England, is called the Restoration Era. Anyway, she was really smart and charismatic, which is essentially what got her into the upper class of England in the first place. However, these are very valuable traits for espionage. However, like most of her life, there are holes here. We don't know everything about her time as a spy. We really don't know much for the most part, except that she was trying to turn in a certain English exile into a double agent against the Dutch government. She could have traveled to other countries and done a bunch of stuff, and we might not ever know about it because espionage is already murky business. So throw that onto an already obscure life, and we can clearly see that there are aspects of Ben that we can only imagine. We do know that she came back to England in serious debt, though. And there are debates on whether she was let off with essentially a slap on the wrist or if she was sent to debtor's prison. Nobody really knows because Aphra Behn's life is really ambiguous and it's full of holes, and sometimes she just disappears for like years on end. So eventually she began to support herself through writing plays. The Forced Marriage was produced in 1671, and it could be seen as a pushback against arranged marriages, among other conservative social norms. Behn wrote a lot of plays in her life. One of her most successful plays was The Rover, which is essentially Restoration-era reality TV, where most of the characters are only driven by sex. She was famous for her comedies that could be seen as abrasive to socially conservative people, which were most people. Famous writers and other notable people, men and women alike, thought that her subject matter was really just too nasty. Even though plenty of dudes could get away with the same stuff, easy peasy. That's just kind of how it was back then. Aphra Behn became legitimate again in the early 20th century when the idea of the new woman entered the cultural psyche. And then we get the biggest crossover event of two icons ever. And I'm not talking about Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny and Space Jam. I'm talking about Virginia Woolf. I'm talking about when Virginia Woolf references Aphra Behn in A Room of One's Own. This is huge. Woolf is known as the OG female writer. If you've had an English lit class, you've read her. Anyway, Virginia Woolf said this about Aphra Behn. This is like LeBron James reminding everyone who Magic Johnson was. This is sick, except this is far more consequential. And you'd think that that'd make people wonder, like, who is Aphra Behn? And you'd think that after the idea of the new woman and women's lib, that Aphra Behn would become more well-known, especially today. But she remains consistently overlooked. Toward the end of her life, she wrote a sort of proto-novel, a piece of fiction that barely predates the novel, called Orinoco. And if you take a sniff of it, Orinoco kind of has an aroma of anti-slavery. It is kind of Some people think that it is an abolitionist text, and it kind of smells like one. Orinoco, the titular protagonist, is a man of color who Ben portrays quite nicely. He's handsome, he's smart, he's a guy to envy, kind of. But he was a prince back in his home country in Africa, and he was enslaved. And so this is his story. I won't spoil any of it. We do have to realize that he is certainly whitewashed. But this was her magnum opus. Its format is similar to what we would now call a novel. It felt very real. It was very rich with detail. It felt pretty biographical. This was a new way to tell a story. This is a sharp deviation from the medieval romances of before, which were mostly made for higher class people. With all these things in mind, that make her a very intriguing literary figure. Why is she not brought up more in school? When I was doing research about her, basically everyone I asked, I asked them if they knew who Aphra Behn was, and everyone said no. Given I live in a state in America that does not have great public education, so point being, she remains a skilled and interesting writer that should be read, and she'll always be the shady foremother of the novel.